Okay, let's review your presentation slides. Okay, you say you'll be explaining these more in detail when you are presenting, but I guess you're using these slides to just briefly introducing students to the 5 principles. So listing 5 principles, and I wonder what these animations are doing here, but hopefully it's for some good. Okay, so seems like you are only dealing with principle 1 and principle 5 in the presentation. The first thing I noticed was you created a lecture note, which is basically a summary of your presentation, and it's different from creating a visual aid for your presentation. So this is something your students would print out beforehand and use for taking notes. So you should redesign these 2 slides. And when you redesign, you need to elaborate on these, because these are just summaries. So you need to expand and elaborate on these 2 summary items so that your students will understand what these 2 points really mean. And when you do that, don't just use text like this. I want you to use oral message as a main source of verbal information and use series of slides to present pictorial and graphic messages. In English writing class, you learn how to effectively communicate through words. When creating visual aid, you are trying to effectively communicate through graphics. So you need to use your visual literacy and multimedia literacy skills to create visual aid. If you need my help with creating visual aid that goes along with what you're going to be actually talking about, come talk to me. Now let's look at the graphic design aspects. The font size is 24 and it's Georgia. Georgia is a relatively larger font compared to Times New Roman, so 24 might be okay. When you pick the font size, you actually need to test the lower limit and upper limit of font size. In other words, what's the minimum optimum font size, or what's the max optimum font size you can use? Generally speaking, 28 font size 28 is easier to see than font size 24, and font size 30 is easier to see than font size 28. So right now you're using 24, and let's check if 30 is okay or not. Maybe 30 is fine. If 30 is too large, you could probably use 28, but seems like 30 is gonna be okay. It looks cluttered because of the background design. So if you make the background simple, if you use a monotone simple background, then it's gonna look okay. Okay, yeah. Font size 30 is okay as long as you have a plain background, which means earlier the background image was decreasing the effective screen area. They're not too much, just a little on the top and some on the bottom, but these 2 areas are not usable for a text because of that, and it made a difference between using font size 30 and using font size 26. This image looks like you're using the bottom line here as part of the graphic, so this should be okay. In this, this red background color and the background image, a pattern, the background design are not doing anything to enhance or improve the animation you're showing here. So they can be extraneous elements from the cognitive perspective. You may not care. The brain still processes these background colors and designs, so that will lead to less efficient learning. So what can you do to reduce those extra elements from this slide? Yes, use a plain white background. Now you have more usable space, effective slide area. You could actually make it larger, and if you want to, you can even make it larger than this. And here, same thing. You need to ask yourself whether or not you are taking advantage of the available space on the screen, available space on a slide. This should work better. There's no reason to keep it smaller. If you can make it as large as, or actually you can make it even larger than that. The bottom of the screen is right here, because you don't need to use the remaining space for anything. You just want to show this GIF animation, so you don't need to keep more slide area for something else. If the background design or background color are in the way, I think actually it's kind of distracting, so you could do something like this. Now the background is no longer distracting. And here, if you're gonna use this image, now you know what you need to do. And same here. I don't know if you're really gonna be using this. It looks like it's a symbolic use of the picture, Remember I talked about two different types of the use of images. This is generally speaking, if you're going to be talking about something concrete, descriptive images should be your primary choice. If your students or viewer are going to have a hard time making connections in this image and what you're talking about, then the image is not going to be a visual aid. Actually, it's going to be a distraction or interference. It could depress learning instead of promote learning. And the text size, now you have to think about the optimum font size for the text. And since you can't use font 30 for this much text, then you need to think about what text to put on the screen. You can't put everything. And if you try to put everything, the text is going to be small like this. That's also something you need to avoid. So your biggest task for revising this is to convert this into the type of visual aid that we are aiming for. So make sure you come ask me questions if you have any questions about my comments and feedback.